Deathcore was never my thing. I generally find this genre boring, repetitive, and just unappealing. However, I did always like Thy Art is Murder and Whitechapel. And while the first one still represents repetitiveness and generic characteristics of the genre, they just do it very well, the latter, Whitechapel, to me is one of the most revolutionary and impactful bands in the genre. I do think that they are the best overall in deathcore, and music that they put out is one step further than anyone else in deathcore. Mark of the Blade to me felt like an interesting transition into what The Valley might be, album which I am reviewing today. The Valley, right off the bat, it became clear it's going to be a very lyrical piece, very personal piece to the vocalist, the man himself, Phil Bozeman, and I was very excited to check out the musicality of this album as well as the lyricism, and that's what we're going to review today. But we're gonna start with mixing, as usual. One of the biggest turnoffs for me in deathcore is lack of clarity in the mix. Some bands do get it right, like I mentioned before, Thy Art, and some bands release a bloody mess of distortion. Thankfully, this is not the case with The Valley. Music gets very overwhelming at times, but never forces you to lose track of instruments or vocals or melody. To me, that is a huge thing in heavier genres. Clarity is what keeps your attention. Guitars sound great, vocals are also top-tier mixing, cleans sound very natural and clean, growls sound, as usual, great. Great job to the production team. This album sounds great technically.
This path I walk is comforting, but now I'm left to sing.
Biggest concern to everyone after singles like Third Depth and Hickory Creek was, what genre is Whitechapel aiming for? And while there are softer parts in the record, I would still very much consider it a deathcore album, and a very heavy one too. It is still heavy as hell, sometimes with even black metal vibes, it seems like. I don't like deathcore because it gets very boring very quick to me, but this is not a problem with this record. Frequent change-ups in songs make the experience very dynamic and authentic. Album does feature songs on a more boring side, like Brimstone and Doom Woods. I would prefer those tracks to be a little more dynamic, but we get what we get. With cleaner vocals, we received more clean guitars that do deliver a great portion of originality, clarity, and distinction in the sound. As for breakdowns, they are pretty original as well, but We Are One's breakdown stands out to me the most. It is one of the highlights of the record with its absolute brutality and heaviness. Vocals are great. A lot more variety of Phil's singing and screaming helps the record a lot. More clean vocals, which definitely helps the record. When it comes to screaming, Phil also uses more higher screams and mid screams instead of just plain growl that is so familiar to this deathcore scene. Overall, sound of the record is a definition of top-tier music writing. Despite being a deathcore album, The Valley achieved variety, dynamics, melody, most importantly, keeps the listener interested and invested. The Valley brings a lot of new things to the table, being deathcore with metalcore, metal, black metal vibes. But I think what makes such huge impact to the listener is not just music, it is also the purpose of the record.
What has the world come to when a demon defiles a witch?
Purpose is a key factor in a good songwriting. Music with no backstory, no emotion, no purpose falls short for me to call it good. What makes a good song is not crazy riffs or breakdowns, not overdone solos and great melodies they are obviously a huge part of it. The main thing that keeps it all together is a purpose. The purpose of The Valley is to tell a story. Phil Bozeman has already told us a story from his childhood in Mark of the Blade with the song Bring Me Home, which sounds actually a lot like everything we hear in The Valley. Only this time, the whole record tells us a very powerful and detailed story of Phil's mother dealing with drug addiction, abusive relationship after the passing of her husband and Phil's dad. When I was reading through interviews about this record, in one of them Bozeman said that his mom was also schizophrenic and she led a diary, a lot of which became a part of lyrical content of The Valley. This is a very dark backstory that sets up a perfect and exactly the mood that this record is aiming for. Complemented by great sound and style of the record, what we get from lyrics is melancholic, depressive, 10-song long journey through the darkest times and parts of Phil's life. The Valley tells us about grief, hate, rage, but also love. Usually, music of the albums is slightly more prioritized than the lyrics. Here it is split down the middle. I have never seen such great balance of the story of the songs and the way they are actually told by the music. It is an important deathcore record, not because it's an original, distinct, quality experiment musically, even though it is, but because it is such a lyrical masterpiece that is also very personal to the musicians themselves. These 10 stories are extremely dark and sad. They bring tears to eyes, but also teach many lessons of life, love being one of the more important ones. The Valley by Whitechapel was not surprisingly an incredible record. With 5 singles out, we received very clear understanding that this record will tell us a very in-depth story of Phil Bozeman's early life, and connected to that, very high-quality music writing. Music videos complement songs very well, which brings us to one of the greatest things about this record: balance. Everything is almost in perfect balance. Mixing, styles, lyrics, and music itself. It is deathcore with clarity. It is music with emotion. It is a story with a purpose. My personal favorite track of the record is the least heavy one musically, but the most heavy one lyrically, Hickory Creek. Although it doesn't mean that almost any other track of The Valley is not a masterpiece or something that is very close to it. Whitechapel has written the best album of the year so far, and I have no regrets saying that. Do yourself a favor and dive into this authentic experience of The Valley. It will leave you speechless, impressed, but most likely change some perspectives on music or even life.